programs to the London and Middlesex community, including to newcomers and refugees via online sessions. So far, the RRAI has presented 22 information sessions on very important legal, social, and financial topics. It is interesting that RRAI was established during the application of a proposal created as a response to the Neighborhood Decision-Making Initiative here in our City of London. So bravo to them. And accepting the award on behalf of Rights and Responsibilities Awareness Initiative is Dr. Hetem Abukarki. Congratulations, and I invite Dr. Abukarki to say a few words, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, the City of London, for recognizing the important work that we are doing with the individuals, helping them to be a better citizens and better community members, which will reflect to this great community and prove that this great country could be a better place for everyone. I am so honored and I am so grateful to be here. Thank you, Your Worship.
Well, thank you, Dr. Abukarki. And this reads the plaque that you will be receiving on behalf of the City of London, that the Municipal Council, on the recommendation of the Corporation of the City of London's Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Oppression Advisory Committee, presents Rights and Responsibilities Awareness Initiative with the 2021 Diversity, Race Relations, and Inclusivity Award, Social Community Services category, with less than 50 members, in recognition of your initiative providing legal, financial, and cultural awareness programs to the London Middlesex community, including to newcomers and refugees via online sessions. And to them, we offer our deepest and sincerest congratulations. Congratulations to them. And colleagues, it's my privilege in the category of social community services, not-for-profit, larger than 50 members. The award recipient is NEST, the Network for Economic and Social Trends, Western University. This award is in recognition of your partnership work in and with the community to mobilize research, education, awareness, and outreach for positive policy impact and social change. For your community-university partnerships to mobilize research, education, and awareness for equity, diversity, inclusion, and decolonization. NEST is a leader in bridging the university community divide and works with London and surrounding community on issues regarding racism and discrimination, and provides an evidence-based for EDID work in the community. This work involves NEST faculty, postdoctoral fellows, and graduate students together with community partners. NEST partnerships elevate the key messages of the university: research, education, and awareness and outreach by taking aim at positive policy impact and social change. Importantly, an ongoing goal is to further develop expertise among community partners. Accepting the award on behalf of the Network for Economic and Social Trends, Western University, is Dr. Vicky Esses. And I'd say to Dr. Esses, congratulations, and we invite you to say a few words, please.
Thank you very much for recognizing the work of the Network for Economic and Social Trends, known as NEST, at Western University. NEST has been in existence for close to 4 years, and it's the flagship research and policy alliance in the Faculty of Social Science. As mentioned, we provide an evidence base for work on diversity, inclusion, anti-racism, and human rights with partners in London, throughout southwestern Ontario, and across Canada. For example, we recently partnered with the London and Middlesex Local Immigration Partnership and 7 other local immigration partnerships across southwestern Ontario to conduct surveys of local experiences of discrimination by immigrants, racialized individuals, and Indigenous peoples. And our goal was to develop a deeper understanding of the impact of discrimination in our region and how to counteract it. Based on this work, a major project on the horizon, engaging more than 20 partners across southwestern Ontario, is Equity in Action, focusing on counteracting racism and discrimination in London and throughout the region. This award motivates us as we continue with our many partners to fight racism and discrimination where we live and where we work. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Esses. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me congratulate NEST, the Network for Economic and Social Trends, Western University, in receipt of the 2021 Diversity, Race Relations, and Inclusivity Award, Social Community Services category, 50-plus members. Congratulations, Dr. Esses, and to your team. And we'll make sure, colleagues, that those plaques go appropriately to these organizations, these outstanding organizations with the city. So, colleagues, we have two additional recognitions we would like to acknowledge. The first, if I might, is I will call on Councillor Hamou, please.
Over the weekend, we had not one, but two London football teams competing for national championships. The London Beefeaters, fresh off an Ontario Football Conference Championship, hosted the Langley Rams at Western Alumni Stadium, located in Ward 6 in the Canadian Junior Football League final. While the Beefeaters came up short, they remain OFC champions and represented London with honor in their first ever Canadian Bowl appearance, and we know that they'll be back. On that same day, just 1 hour later, the Western Mustangs went head-to-head against Saskatchewan in the Vanier Cup, hosted in the beautiful Quebec City. The Mustangs overcame a halftime deficit, delivering a clutch performance en route to a 27-21 win, capturing their first national championship since 2017 and their 8th all-time, and it definitely won't be their last. On behalf of Council and all Ward 6 constituents, I'd like to recognize this remarkable achievement while extending congratulations to all Mustang players, coaches, and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamou. Colleagues, I'd like to take a moment now to recognize our first responders and our London Health Sciences Centre Pediatric Emergency Department. As you all know, 2021 has been a particularly difficult year, and we appreciate all that they do. Providing specialized pediatric care for babies, children, and teens up to 18 years of age, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is an incredible commitment. The Pediatric Emergency Department cares for approximately 36,000 children per year and serves as the regional pediatric trauma center. In addition to doctors and nurses, your team of social workers and child life specialists truly make a difference during a child's emergency. And so, to the London Health Sciences Centre Pediatric Emergency Department, we'd like to thank you for your caring and for your compassion. We say, on behalf of all of London City Council, thanks for what you do. It was exactly 1 week ago, last Tuesday night on November 30th, 10 people were struck by a vehicle on Riverside Drive near Wonderland Road. Tragically, an 8-year-old girl, Alexandra Stemp, was killed as a result of that horrible crash. Described by her parents as a brilliant and vivacious little girl with a terrific sense of humor, a talented artist who loved her older brother with all of her heart, Alexandra's loss has played heavily on the hearts and minds of her family and all Londoners. We've seen such an outpouring of support for the Stemp family, both emotionally and financially, along with solemn tributes over the weekend, as countless homes, municipal and other prominent buildings throughout our city were lit up in Girl Guide blue. Colleagues, I'd like to ask you now to stand and pause for a moment of silence in honor of Alexandra, her family, and also all of those who continue to recover from their injuries. Would you pause with me, please? Thank you very much. Colleagues, I'm not aware of any confidential matters to be considered in public, but I am going to ask for a change in order to move item 4, council in closed session, and 10th report of council in closed session to after stage 13 bylaws, something we typically do. Do I have a mover, please? I see Councillor Van Meerbergen, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Thank you very much. Let's call the question.
Councillor Van Holst,
I vote yea.
closing the vote, the motion's passed.
Thank you very much. And colleagues, I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting held on November 6, 2021 that are on the floor. I'll look for a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Fife Miller, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Thank you. Comments or questions? Then let's call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed. 15.
Thank you very much. Communications and petitions. 6.1, dealing with encouraging the growth of food in urban areas. 6.2, dealing with 99 Southdale Road West. 6.3, dealing with 1453, 1459 Oxford Street East, and 648, 656 Ayleswood Avenue. 6.4, which is new sidewalks in established neighborhoods. 6.5, the governance working group membership. 6.6, the City of London procurement process assessment review. What I'd be looking for is a motion to refer those items to the appropriate committees where they're to be considered. Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Any comments or questions? I see none. Let's call the question, please.
Mr. Mayor, my
Yeah.
button it wouldn't let me submit.
Councillor Cassidy, perhaps if you could give us a verbal, I'll do the same. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Through the chair, all of the votes have come in. Closing the votes, the motion's carried 15 to 0.
Just Councillor Cassidy and me with the verbals. Thank you very much, colleagues. There are no motions to which notice has been given. So I wonder if we could turn our attention, colleagues, to our various reports. And the first is the 17th report of Planning Environment Committee. May I turn this over to Councillor Hopkins, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to bring forward the 17th report of the Planning and Environment Committee. I will be pulling number 17, and I have been asked to pull number 21, which is the 1453, 1459 Oxford Street East and Ayleswood Avenue application, as well as the 17, which is the Southdale Road West.
Thank you very much. Does anyone wish to have any other item dealt with separately? Back to you, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. As always, planning is a very busy agenda with numerous holding provisions and parking standards review going out for consultation and a number of public participation meetings that were held. One in particular was the proposed amendments to the London Plan and zoning bylaw when it comes to encouraging growing food in urban areas. So with that, I would also just add, we received a delegation from Cindy Levin, the chair of EPAC, as well as the Lot's report. And with that, I will put all these items on the floor.
So all the items with the exception of item 17, 3.3 and 21, 3.7 are for consideration. Any other comments or questions with respect to those items? I see none. We'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 15-0.
Yeah, I would like to put number 17, 3.3, which is the application for 99 Southdale Road West on the floor. There are a number of amendments, administrative amendments and housekeeping considerations. So I want to bring that to the council's attention, as well as the ward councillor, Councillor Van Meerbergen has asked to speak to this as well. So I'm not sure how to proceed. I'll probably start off with the housekeeping amendments.
I'm wondering if you'd like to put those on the floor, those amendments. Those are the ones that were presented to council. We received that in our communications earlier. I wonder if you could identify them, and that might help colleagues.
Yeah, one of them is the pre-amendment sheet with the recommendation, if you can see the changes as it relates to B from the previous recommendation. The other housekeeping is the reference to CP instead of Z. And the other one is the reference to density as well. I may go through you, Your Worship, to the clerk just to get clarification.
Let's go to the clerk then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before council, another item came to attention, and we just as you went into council, circulated a revised map to you with respect to the same application. There is a stormwater management pond included, and it was the wrong zoning for that area. Perhaps Mr. Barrett could explain it a little better than I am.
Mr. Barrett, can you enlighten us, please?
Thank you, through your worship. Yes, we apologize. There were a few housekeeping technical errors with this. Maybe if I could just clear up the density one first, just to help the council understand. The base zone that had been applied to the zone came with a density greater than, in fact, was approved and was discussed at the planning committee meeting. So with the consent of the applicant, that amendment was made whereby the base zoning is shown as 100 units per hectare, and that's the number that was discussed at the public meeting. The other matter is a matter of mapping. There's a stormwater management facility associated with the site that's going to be included. It can't be shown in the OS4 area because that's the area to be conserved. So the line work is amended to show where the stormwater management facility would be located, would be under the same zoning as the rest of the development. And then the OS4 would go on the remainder of the lands of the woodland area to be preserved.
So do colleagues have any questions for Mr. Barrett with respect to the amendments and the reference to the, all the reference that he has made with respect to this amendment sheet put forward by the chair? So we have on the floor the amendments as put forward by the chair. I'll need a seconder for that, please. I see Councillor Cassidy. Thank you. Comments, questions? Then let's call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14-1.
Yes, I know the ward councillor would like to make a few comments, but I would like to add to the public participation meeting that we received a delegation from the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox community as well, and it was a conversation at the planning committee that they would continue to work with the applicant and to continue further conversations through the site plan process as well. I think that was really important to note from the public participation meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we open this up for either any debate or other additional comment, I will require that this motion as amended be put on the floor and seconded. Chair, are you willing to do that? And do I have a seconder? I see Councillor Fife Miller. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Van Riebeeck, your name has come up more than once. I'm not trying to goad you into talking, but if you'd like to say something with respect to this, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair and Mayor. I did want to, sorry, 1 second, just getting my, I did want to bring forward some positive news. As came up at the planning committee meeting, there was some concern from the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox community about the proposed development. I was happy to attend a meeting earlier this afternoon, face-to-face meeting between the applicant and the Greek Orthodox community. They were able to come to terms, reach a compromise, and right now the applicant either has already submitted or is in the process of submitting a letter agreeing to what was stated. In summary, it's basically moving the blocks that are proposed, there's 6 of them, around so that the preponderance of the floors, if you will, the higher buildings, are further away from the church community itself. For example, along the woodlot line and more towards the commercial properties. So all in all, very successful, and I would ask colleagues to support this.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions with respect to item 3.3 as amended? Councillor Van Holst, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was I believe, a letter requesting a referral to the next meeting. Is that next council meeting? Is that no longer necessary?
I don't want to presume. It would seem not, but I will go back to the chair for that.
Just to give council members further information, I think it's really important to understand all these policies that have come into effect here. And I understand that the base zoning regulation of the density provision of the R9-5 zone permits 125 units per hectare, whereas the swap secondary plan restricts the density to 100 and units per hectare through the zoning bylaw. Therefore, to rectify the zoning and the swap secondary plan, the bylaw to be considered by council includes a special provision that restricts the density to 100 units per hectare. This application is under that.
Thank you. Any other comments, Councillor Van Holst?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? Councillor Van Riebeeck, please. You've already spoken. I'm sorry. And since you're on mute, it doesn't seem to matter anyway.
It was just a point of information for the councillor's question. Yeah, you correctly answered it, Your Worship.
Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, let's call the question as amended.
15.
Motion carries 15.
Thank you. I'm not sure colleagues heard that, 15-0, according to the clerk, it was carried. Thank you. Back to Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So the next one that I've been asked to have pulled is number 21, which is the application at 1453, 1439 Oxford Street East, and 648, 656 Ayreswood Avenue. This was a public participation meeting that was held at the planning. The staff recommendation was to refuse it. There was a discussion for referral. It did not pass. The committee did support staff's recommendation. I know we have subsequently received further information, and one of the concerns was about the process of holding the public participation, if it was fair. And I have spoken with city clerks to make sure that we did undertake the correct procedure when it came to the public participation meeting. And from what I understand, we did allow the applicant the 5 minutes that was allowed. And the applicant did suggest that if there were any questions from the committee, that he would be available. I think it's important to make sure that council is aware that we did undertake the correct process. With that, I will put this on the floor.
Thank you. Any comments or questions, colleagues? I see Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. And on this one, we have indeed received additional information, and I don't at all disagree with Councillor Hopkins in terms of the public participation process. I think we followed our standard procedures correctly, but we've also heard from the applicant directly between PEC and today that they are open to continuing to work with our staff to find a path forward here. Including working with HDC to formalize affordable housing agreements, including working with them on height and density. So it's my intention to ask council to consider a referral. The language will not be really that much different than what I raised at PEC, which was that the application by Red Maple Properties relating to the properties at 453 and 459 Oxford Street East and 648, 656 Ayreswood Avenue be referred back to Civic Administration to undertake the following actions and report back at a future meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee. And those would be Clause A, to work with the applicant to ensure the appropriate framework is in place for the provision of affordable housing units at 70% of the average market rate for 50 years. B, to work with the applicant to determine options to resolve the sanitary sewer capacity issues. And C, to work with the applicant to revise the application to consolidate the subject properties as being within the rapid transit corridor. It being noted that this is notwithstanding the 100-meter policy guideline adjacent to a rapid transit station for the purpose of developing height and density suitable to such locations. And by such locations, that's referring to the rapid transit corridor. So that's the referral that I'm asking for. Well, I guess I believe Councillor Van Meerbergen has indicated he'll second that for me, and then we can perhaps have some discussion on that.
Well, why don't we find that out? Councillor Van Meerbergen, are you seconding? All right, thank you very much. I have a speakers list. I'll start with Councillor Hillier, please. Oh, I'm sorry?
Sorry, I haven't actually yielded the floor.
I was yielding for you, but go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
I just wanted to provide a little bit of context around the reason to ask for this referral again. You know, I do think that there's value in letting our staff talk to the applicant further on this rather than just ending it outright. I'd hate to send this back to a square one stage with a brand new pre-consult for both the applicant and our staff, spend that time over again on items they've already discussed. Colleagues may not be aware that the application that came before us was actually a revision of an earlier application that was at a lower height. In having heard from the applicant that they're certainly recognizing, and I would say, if we were discussing the application as presented tonight, I would be a no as well, because I do think that the height is excessive for this location. But But I think that we've heard from the applicant, they're willing to work with our staff on this. I think there is an opportunity to shorten the process in terms of, instead of sending it back to square one, that we send it back and give them another try here. It wouldn't be the first time that we've referred an application back for further discussion with staff. And I think the indications we've got from the applicant is they've heard loud and clear that we don't really have support from anyone on the existing application, and so they're willing to revise it and come back with something new. So I hope that folks will consider that, and we'll see what other folks have to say now. I will yield the floor.
Consider yourself yielded. Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Hillier, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a question for staff. When the corner of Oxford and Highbury is developed, what will the height restrictions be right across the road from Rio Hampton Avenue in that corner up by Fanshawe? Because that's a large parcel that's going to be developed. I just want to know what the height restrictions on that parcel will be.
Why don't we start with Mr. Kotsvis? You can direct it if you need to, sir.
Yeah, I think there is a I'm assuming you're talking about the London psychiatric lands that were, so there is a secondary plan for that. I will defer to Mr. Barrett. He might have a bit more detail in terms of the types of heights that you might see on that property.
Thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, through your worship, and I apologize. I'm struggling to try to pull up that information. As Mr. Kotsvis indicated, there is a secondary plan on those lands, and they also are within a portion of them are within the transit village. So there's a different set of height permissions that go with that. I'm just trying to quickly find what those are. If I could come back, perhaps once I get that information, rather than trying to fill airtime as I scroll through to try to find the correct answer, if I may.
Wouldn't be
Okay,
the first. Thank you very much. Councillor Hillier, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is obvious. If we're going to restrict development right next door to this location, and then all of a sudden a 30-story building pops up, we're going to look very bad.
All right, thank you. Any other questions that you might have, Councillor Hillier? If not, I'm going to send this over to Councillor Salee, depending on, but by the way, I'll reserve the right that as Mr. Barrett comes back with some response, if you want to follow up on that, there's still time within your allotment here. Councillor Salee, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I just appreciate the motion from Councillor Lewis. I'll be supporting the referral. I think it's a great opportunity for the applicant and staff to work out some of the challenges that we've heard at the Planning Environment Committee. I appreciate the feedback that I heard. I know I got an email as well from the applicant as well today. So I guess I'd encourage everyone to support the referral. I think there's a need for more housing in this area, you know, especially with the students and just residents in the area. So I think this is warranted. And I think hopefully, I hope to see more development in Ward 3. It doesn't really happen that often. I think this is probably the third or fifth time since my entire term on council. Could be wrong, but so I think there's always a need in the East End, and I think this is something. So I continue to welcome developers to come towards the East End because there's housing needs, and hopefully we can figure out something in the long term to fill the demand.
Thank you very much, Councillor Salee. Any other comments or questions before I ask if Mr. Barrett's had the opportunity? Councillor Turner, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Worship. Just through you to staff, what would be the impact of the referral back? Recognizing we do this from time to time, but there's a fairly unequivocal recommendation for refusal here. Is there a prospect of success in a referral back, or is this kind of irreconcilable?
I wonder if we give that to Mr. Barrett.
Well, I can jump in, Your Worship, while Mr. Barrett's.
Mr. Kotsvis, you two are really mixing me up today, but you go ahead, please.
So there's a couple of things I think you may want to consider as council. One is we've been working with the applicant, I believe, since September 2020. So it's been a lot of discussions on this. The timeline for the application has lapsed, so it is within the purview of the applicant to appeal for lack of decision. So not having a decision and having a referral back would not benefit the city at this point. The other part as well is that the referral back is really a direction to staff. It's not necessarily a direction to the applicant. And although we love to try to negotiate and try to get down to something that we would be much more comfortable with, we've been having a lot of these discussions for some time and it's not come to fruition. So that could be problematic. The other third part I would mention would be is the part C to the resolution or the direction. I think we had some discussion about that at Planning Environment Committee as well. And Mr. Barrett might want to speak to that one a little bit as well, or add to my comments.
I'm almost nervous to ask Mr. Barrett, but why don't you try, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. To the first question that was asked related to the heights. So within the transit village, the heights are permitted from 15 to 22 stories. So this ask is actually even greater than what that ask is, or than what the permissions would be there. And as was indicated, there's also a secondary plan on these lands, and I'm just rapidly scrolling through that now to find there was a table of heights, but it would have been consistent or probably less than the 15 to 22 stories. As it relates to the referral, I believe that Mr. Kotzfuss perhaps hit the biggest issue, which is it's a referral to staff. It's not a referral to the applicant. And certainly, while I understand the councillor said the applicant has expressed some desire to work with it and made mention of a revised application, certainly we'd be more than happy to look at a revised application, but the position of working from, as was noted, an established staff position with something that we know the applicant has not been sort of in favor of makes, I guess, a referral a little bit difficult. We're not too sure what, in fact, we're bringing to the table. As it relates to the clause C and working within the context of the rapid transit corridor, certainly as part of the consideration of the application, that interpretation can be made as to whether or not the land should be included within, and based on the nature of the application, staff would be making that recommendation to you as part of their recommendations to whether or not these lands should be considered. The reason, quite honestly, in this instance, why it was not done was because the positions were so far apart that we, in fact, couldn't recommend that you interpret the entire parcel of land to be within the RTC or the Rapid Transit Corridor if, in fact, we were not supporting the notion in the first instance. So that, quite honestly, is the reason why. So with all due respect, within the referral, I don't know that we need the direction to consider making that determination, because that would be part of the determination on the review of the application. It was our position, and I believe that we brought this forward at the public participation meeting at the Planning and Environment Committee, that it's just a cleaner process to start over again with a new application, and these matters can be addressed. And certainly the applicant has heard the concerns of council, has heard the concerns of staff, and heard the concerns of public as it relates to this application. And those, I would suggest to you, the issues of sanitary capacity, the issue of the appropriate level of intensity, the issue of the appropriate amount of bonusing that might support any increase in that level of intensity, and the appropriateness of the consolidation of the parcels as it would relate to the rapid transit corridor would all be part of that consideration of an application.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thanks. That was a lot of really important information in that response. I certainly appreciate that from both Mr. Barrett and Mr. Kotzfuss. I think for those reasons, I think we should really take caution in such a referral back. Most importantly there was the item that by not having a decision of council, should this get appealed to LPAT, then there's not a reference from council by which to anchor any of the city's position in our case when we go forward there. So, and I think Mr. Barrett said it well, that the opportunity, and it just becomes cleaner to start the process over again. It sounds like for a wide number of reasons, this is a fair departure from anything that would be supported in our planning documents and in our process. So, I'd urge that you defeat the referral. I think the refusal is appropriate on its own, and the process can continue. It doesn't mean it's the end of the process. The applicant still owns the lands. The applicant still has an interest in developing on the lands. The applicant still will place density on those lands consistent with what they're allowed to do. But they need to work with staff to get there. The referral is one path towards it, but it has, as you heard, it's fraught with a lot of perils and really complicates the city's ability to work with the applicant in the appropriate way. The applicant's not walking away from this property. It's valuable. It does need to be developed. I agree with my colleagues. It just needs to be done right.
Thank you. I'd like to circle back if I can before I go to our next speaker to Councillor Hillier, who had a question answered by staff, and wonder if that prompts any other questions in terms of your time.
No, I'm good with that. I'm just concerned what the end result looks like. That's all.
Thanks very much. Let me call then on Deputy Mayor Morgan, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question for Mr. Barrett, and then I'll make some comments. Going along the lines of what Councillor Turner asked about and something that was said by our staff, I want to understand, I want to confirm my understanding of the process on what happens if we refuse it. The application could appeal that, or the applicant could appeal that, and the basis of the staff position would be council's position of refusal. If we were to refer it back and the applicant appealed, they would be able to appeal under the grounds of non-decision by passing the statutory 120 days, I believe it is. And then I believe our staff, instead of not having a position, you would come back to planning committee to get a position to take to the defense at the tribunal. In other words, we would end up at the same spot if, council confirmed staff's position at that point when there was that check-in, knowing that that's obviously up for debate. But I want to understand that that's the process, that we still have the opportunity to carve out a position at PEC on this to be the basis of the city's defense.
Mr. Barrett?
Through your worship, yes, if there is an appeal on the decision, then it's that decision that would be the basis of the appeal and the positions that would be taken before the OLT. If the appeal is based on a lack of decision, then Councillor Morgan is correct. Then we would, as a matter of course, be coming back to get a position that we would then take to the OLT to put forward as council's position on the matter, because there wouldn't be a position. The basis of the appeal would be the lack of a decision. You wouldn't have had a decision. So we would have to come back and find out what the position of council would be before the OLT.
Deputy Mayor?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, and I understand that adds a step to the process, but I know we'll have a chance to carve out a position. So on my thoughts on this, and I appreciated the area councillors weighing in on this as well, is our staff had said a couple of times that they had worked with the applicant and they hadn't come to anything that was close. And I agree, the application as it currently stands is not close to what we should be approving. But I think the difference here is you had the planning committee give them a big fat no, and that probably got their attention, and they've written a letter now. And in the first line of that letter, it says, they're requesting that the application be referred back to planning staff for further discussions in order to bring forward a development proposal with bonusing provisions more in keeping in line with the planned function of the subject lines. In other words, they're recognizing that their application is off base here. They said all matters relating to this proposal are open for meaningful review, and an endorsement of referral back to staff would not be considered an endorsement of the current 24-story, 381 hectare proposal. And it sounds to me like they're trying to be genuine in recognizing that this is not close to being approved, that there's an opportunity here to have discussions. And I think they may be highly motivated now, knowing that the planning committee had no interest in supporting this moving forward. So I'm inclined on this not to necessarily make them start the application over, especially given the local councillors' feedback on this, and have this opportunity to go back to them through this process and see where it goes. But I will say, and I know we can't direct the applicant, that from my perspective, I think that the planning committee made a good decision with the application as it currently stands. I don't think this is even close to what's needs to happen in the area. I think there are significant issues related to the sanitary sewer capacities that need to be dealt with. And there are certainly, this applicant will need to come into line with our staff's position, or very close to it, respecting the parameters of the referral. And I'm hoping that they're listening to this debate and they hear that, because certainly a referral back for me is not in any way, as they'd said, an endorsement of their current application, which I think a planning committee made a good decision on. That being said, I'm willing to give them another go at this. And if it turns out that they want to choose to appeal it on non-decision, well, we'll have our opportunities to support what our staff have said and carve out a position for municipal council if necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. At committee, I support the staff recommendation. It was primarily because the applicant had come back a second time and did not come close to addressing concerns of staff at that time, primarily around density, a number of levels. So here we are. I have listened to the debate, and I put great weight on the local councillor Slee's words tonight. So I guess I want to have go through you, Chair, to staff with a question. What would be the delay? So if we went down Avenue 1, where we rejected this proposal and they had to start from scratch, versus if we referred it back and the developer was able to properly address the concerns of staff to satisfy staff on these contentious issues, what would be the timeline? Estimate, I know you don't know, you don't have a crystal ball, but approximately, would this delay the project by a year or more if they had to start back at scratch compared to if they could go down, the route that's being proposed tonight with the amendment?
Mr. Barrett?
Recognizing that my crystal ball is cloudy, if it was referred back, we've got 120 days to get it back in front of you. So it's not a year-long process. How long it takes on a referral, on the back and forth on a discussion before there would be something to bring back before the committee, we don't have a control over that. So I don't know if that would be 3 months or if it would be the 6 months, the same as 120 days. That would be the timeline under a brand new application.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. So I'm seeing both sides here, and I'm having, in my mind right now where I'm going to go. But what I have to look at is I believe that, in my mind, we need housing. Two, I believe that going the route B with this amendment would be a quicker way to get that housing built. I see affordable housing here. I'm not keen to, give this developer more leeway, but given the words of the local councillor Slee, I will support this with the caveat that if this comes again before planning and I don't see great movement on areas of density here, I will not be supporting it going further.
Thank you. Any other comments from colleagues? I see Councillor Cassidy, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question to staff. So part of the reason for the refusal is the size of this property and the fact that a good chunk of it is not within the rapid transit corridor. So simply because it's in this referral to consolidate, is that, would staff see that as a requirement to revise a policy that's on the books and then therefore revise your recommendation to council at a future meeting, notwithstanding what the policies are of the rapid transit corridor?
Mr. Barrett?
Through the chair, through your worship, through the mayor, it would perhaps be best if that wasn't there at all, because it in fact is directing, it could be implied to be directing an interpretation. As I indicated to you, the notion of whether or not, let me start. The consolidation of properties along the rapid transit corridor is supported by policy in the London plan. So that it's not an untoward notion. And through that consolidation, as part of our recommendation to you, where we would support that, we would be recommending that the interpretation be made such that it would include those properties that have been incorporated. So the notion of consolidation is not bad, and it's not contrary to the policies. And certainly there are instances where we've looked at that and we've applied those policies, where we have amalgamated parcels to support a more intense form development, and we've asked that interpretation be made. So this is not contrary, but my fear is that one could construe that the way it's constructed within the referral is that the direction is there for us to just make that interpretation anyway. And so if this is to come back, I personally would be more comfortable that it not be making that explicit reference and providing for some direction on the interpretation of the RTC policy, but allow that to come through any revised or amended application.
Well, we may, it may be considered that the mover and seconder want to consider that, but let's stay with Councillor Cassidy, please.
Okay. So that was part of the problem with the referral for me. I thought that the planning committee did a good job in your deliberations on this file. I felt like this exact referral was refused by the committee, and now I'm hearing a couple of committee members speak in favor of the exact same motion, without really a lot of new information. So we have a letter from the developer who's promising to do better this time, even though they've been talking to staff since September 2020 and had ample opportunity to do better. They've had ample opportunity to change their position, to compromise, and they chose not to. So I'm not really buying their letter, and I really don't think that this is new information. I think that there is a secondary plan in place, and we've dealt with a number of secondary plans this year. And I'm going to go back to the thing that I always say: a secondary plan is in place to protect when there is a conflict between a higher density area and a lower density residential area. The secondary plan protects that lower density residential area and provides for that transitioning so that we would see the higher densities and the biggest heights along the arterial roads and further away with some buffering and transitioning of heights down as you get closer to the residential area. When you see the residential, the aerial map of this area, consolidating these properties and treating it all as rapid transit corridor is eliminating all of those protections from the secondary plan. I hear what I agree that we do need housing. We talk about it all the time. I agree that we do need to provide incentives and a little bit of pressure on developers to provide more affordable housing. But we did have also, when I'm disputing the notion of the student housing, we had a letter from Fanshawe College not in favor of this development as it was presented. And I do know that that our post-secondary institutions have been affected by the pandemic. And I do know that there are empty spots in the area where students would normally be residing. That doesn't mean we're not going to need the more spaces for students and other people down the road. But right now in this particular area, student housing is not in a crisis. I think staff have been extremely clear in their position with this developer. And as I said already, the developer is the one that does not seem to be interested in adjusting their position. I think that the planning committee made a very clear message, gave a very clear message to the developer. And I think that this council needs to follow through and continue with that clear message. And that will be the incentive for this particular applicant to work with staff in a meaningful way. I won't be supporting the referral, and I absolutely
30 seconds.
Will not support part 3. Sorry, C.
Thank you very much. You made reference to C, and I do have, Councillor Lewis has gotten my attention with respect to, as the mover of this, to provide some wording based on some of the advice from staff. And I wonder if I could look to Councillor Lewis, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think to make this simple for everyone, I'm prepared to withdraw C from the referral. And hearing Mr. Barrett say that they would be taking that into consideration as an option anyway, I think it's clear that that is on the table for staff to consider that interpretation on a revised application. So I'm prepared to withdraw C from that referral.
Do you have Councillor Van Meerbergen's support for that? You do. I'll now recognize Councillor Hopkins, please.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to my colleagues for your comments. I'm always interested in what everyone's opinions are around the horseshoe, and in particular, this referral, which I was going to say is the same referral that we discussed at planning. So nothing has changed, and the concerns for me still remain. I understand C is going to be taken off the table, but the one thing that I think is really important to understand with this referral is that we're asking staff to do the work, not the applicant. And that is a concern for me. That's not going to, staff are going to have 120 days here to do what? I'm not sure if they're going to come up with, resolve the sanitary source. With this application. I have seen no change from the planning committee meeting to where we are today. I won't be supporting the referral. I do appreciate, though, Councillor Sully's comments. He has been consistent as long as I've known him on council that housing is really important in the East End. We've heard that we can get density, we can get up to 22 stories even in this area. But this application is far removed from what is allowed in this area. And for that, I won't be supporting the referral and will be supporting, again, staff's recommendation to refuse.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Oh, Your Worship, if I may.
Oh, yeah, please.
Just to continue my thought process of planning,
Sorry.
I would also encourage the applicant to work with city staff moving forward. I think that still is available to the applicant and really would encourage the applicant to work with city staff. Thank you.
And thank you. I'm sorry, I thought you were done there, Councillor Hopkins, or I would never have cut you off, especially as chair. Any other comments or questions, colleagues? I see Councillor Helmer and then Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. Just through the mayor, I wonder if some of the engineering staff or perhaps planning staff can answer about the servicing constraint. There's two things that have been identified in the report. One is that the existing sanitary sewer is really close to capacity and this proposed development would put it over. So that's one of the reasons suggested for refusal. the second idea is that the applicant could pay at their cost to upgrade the infrastructure. And I wonder, without getting into a lot of the details, what would be involved in upgrading that infrastructure? I mean, how much of it are we talking about that needs to be enlarged?
I don't know if I start with Mr. Baird or Mr. Kotzfis for reference, but let's start there.
Through your worship, you don't start with me, but I will, if Mr. Kotzfis doesn't have the answer, I will see if I can find something for you.
Mr. Kotzfis, have you got something there for us?
Through your worship, I wish I did, but I don't know the exact amount of pipe that would need to be upgraded. My apologies. But we could certainly try to find out as the debate continues.
Perhaps, Councillor Elmer, you've got some other questions or comments, or if it's all based on that, then we may have to wait a bit. We'll call on Councillor Van Holst and bring you back as you wish.
I'm just going to raise another related question, and perhaps it's the same person who will be answering. This site is sort of just near the intersection of three drainage areas. So you've got the area to the north that drains to Adelaide, the area to the southwest that drains to Vauxhall, and then the area to the east and southeast, which drains down to Pottersburg in terms of the wastewater treatment plants. And I wanted to just ask, because the site that's to the west of this, the large area that is owned by Bluestone, they are proposing to redevelop a lot of that into higher density. Is there anything that's going on in the East London servicing study that would fundamentally change where this site that we're talking about now would be draining to? Like, is it possible that it's going to start draining towards Vauxhall instead of down 2nd Street to Pottersburg?
Mr. Kotzfis, are you able to respond to that?
Through your worship, unfortunately, no. I'm wondering if, I'm not sure if Ms. Scheer has any information on that, recognizing this is just on the floor, but I don't at this point in time.
Do you want to try, Ms. Scheer? Can you shed some light?
Thank you, Your Worship. Unfortunately, I can't at this time. We're not in a position to be able to provide that information yet with where we are on the East London servicing study.
Sorry, Councillor Hummer, we're not getting the answers you're asking, but I appreciate that it's that these are, to be fair, it's other folks that I'm sure would have those answers. Anything else for you?
Yeah, I'm just going to weigh in on the issue of the referral. I've supported referrals in the past where something has been recommended to be refused, but it seemed like we were relatively close to working something out. I think sometimes we want to think about what is going to be the most effective decision at this particular point. The applicant initially proposed the 18-story building in the pre-consultation on that idea. They would have definitely heard from planning staff that that was too intense and too tall. And despite that, they came back with a 24-story building that's even larger and even more intense. And it's no surprise that it's being recommended to be refused. I think they can see the writing on the wall based on the discussion at Planning Committee. And at this point, it's a salvage operation to try and save the fees that they have to pay for an official plan amendment and a zoning amendment, which if we refuse it, they'll have to pay those again to come in for another amendment. They could have avoided this problem by just proposing a shorter building. And I'm sure planning staff would have supported it. And the Planning Committee would have supported it, and we'd be approving, a 12-story or 14-story building. It's very easy, I think, to look at the heights that are allowed in the rapid transit corridor in the London plan, between 12 and 16 stories, depending on where you are in those rapid transit corridors, even higher in the transit villages, to kind of guess where the right level is. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of time wasted on this application, the applicant's time, planning staff's time, because they proposed something that was much too big. And so I think that probably the most decisive thing we could do is just say no, and they could apply again. They'll have to pay the fee again. They'll have to revise their plans, which they'd have to do either way. And they'll be on the new clock. And they'll probably get back to us faster than if we were to refer it. If we refer it, Mr. Barrett said, you got 120 days from when we receive the new application, we have to come back to you with a recommendation. It could actually be longer with a referral. It could take longer. Now, I'm as keen as anyone else to see a high density building on this site. It looks like it can accommodate a 12-story building with the servicing that's in place right now. So I guess the question is, what's the quickest pathway to get to that kind of outcome? I actually think a refusal is probably the most decisive and quickest way to get to that. The applicant will be back in with a new application, probably in that range, and we can deal with it in short order. So I hear where Councillor Salee is coming from. I hear where Councillor Lewis is coming from. They're trying to get a slightly less intense proposal in front of us, but I think refusal rather than referral is probably the best way to do it, given how things have unfolded so far.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Your Worship. So my question through you to our staff is with regard to solving the sewer capacity dilemma. I think that's definitely going to be work that needs to be done by our internally. And I wanted to ask, how long will that take?
Sorry, how long will what take, please? Just to be
How long will
specific.
it take to come up with a solution if the applicant is going for something larger than 12 stories and we need to take some action? How long will that require us?
Mr. Barrett, any thoughts?
Your Worship, I can't give you an exact timeline, and while I don't have the exact information, I'm recalling some of the discussion that was held. The issues with respect to the sanitary servicing is related very much to the intensity of the development that's proposed. So certainly a lower level of intensity is something that could be worked. And I think where we land on what that amount is could address whether or not there are alternative solutions or interim solutions that could be done. It's my understanding the longer term solution for these lands has not yet been, as Ms. Scher indicated, there's still work that has to be done on the ultimate servicing strategy and the ultimate servicing plan for these areas. But my understanding was that there was some information provided that could provide for some interim solutions based on the level of the intensity. So that's a long, convoluted way of saying it could go relatively quickly based on what's there and what alternative solutions could be come up with, and what how much capacity in fact exists. I would also add that in fact that work, a lot of that work has to be done by the proponent, not by us. So again, that the timing on that is again very much going to be driven by the applicant and not by the city.
Thank you, Councillor Van Holst.
Okay, thank you. I think that's helpful. My next question: the density is that driven solely by the height that's being requested?
Mr. Barrett?
Through worship, it's related to the height only in as much as that's the number of units. The density is calculated by the number of units that they're proposing on the land area occupied by what it is that's being proposed. So the height is including or bringing more and more units, and that increase in units is increasing the density on the site.
Councillor Van Holst.
Right, thank you. Now, if this were to be included, if they were consolidated and considered to be in the rapid transit corridor, then just remind me what the maximum height would be there. Is it the 22?
Mr. Barrett?
No, in the RTC, it's not the 22. It's the lower height. It's the, oh gosh, the up to, I believe it's up to 16, up to 15 with the bonusing. The building next door is 14, so it's up to 15 with the bonusing within the RTC. The consolidation has already been considered for that level of density that's been done. That level of density and the intensity that's proposed is over that entire site. It's not based on a call of whether or not it was in the RTC or not. It's how much they've actually proposed in the application.
Councillor Van Holst.
Okay, thank you. I guess the observation I would make is that many times developers are coming and asking us for heights greater than than we seem to have contemplated previously. Is there, and we are in a position where we need more housing, and height is an easy way to get more. If something's being developed, add a number of more stories, and there's an increase in housing that happens quite quickly. Is there, do we need to do some reconsideration of heights? Maybe I'll provide that question, but I realize that the answer may be difficult.
That may be a broader question for another time. I'm not certain, but Mr. Barrett, it's been asked.
Very quickly, through your worship, the height permissions that are provided in the London plan are actually, in most instances, greater than the heights that exist in the current planning framework in the city. So it's not an issue of do we have enough height, it's an issue of where this height is being asked for and where it's being applied. So I would suggest to you that a broad stroke brush, do we need to look at our heights tables? I think our heights are appropriate. It's whether or not those heights are in the right location. And the London plan actually provides a much broader location for where these heights can occur.
Anything else then, Councillor?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I have no other speakers on the list. You'll note that we're dealing with referral related to A and B, which if you refresh your screens, you will see that motion there. This is on the referral. And with that, we will call the question.
Councillor Turner?
Motion is lost, 7-8.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hopkins, back to you.
I think that is my report. Thank you. Oh. Sorry, I'd like to put the staff's recommendation on the floor.
Thanks very much. Any other comments or questions? Then we'll call the question.
Motion carries 13-2.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that very much. Now, colleagues, 8.2, the 16th report of the Community and Protective Services Committee. I'd like to call on Councillor Helmer, please.
Thank you. I'm not aware of anybody wanting to pull anything separately, so I think I can put the entire report on the floor. I will draw your attention to two items.
Before I ask you to comment, I wonder if there is, I appreciate that, Councillor Helmer, if anyone does wish to deal with something separately, and then I'll get you to comment, please, in case you were going to comment on something that someone wishes to have pulled. Councillor Helmer.
Good to go.
Good to go. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I just wanted to comment on two items, one of which is the grant for the Vision Zoho development of affordable housing and market housing on the old Victoria Hospital lands. Obviously, this is being recommended by committee, and it's a wonderful idea. I hope it receives support at council. I wanted to say to the people who've been working on that project, the various agencies that are involved, the city staff. Keep up the great work. This is exactly what we need to see if we're going to reach the next item, which I'm going to talk about, which is the 3,000 units, the roadmap to 3,000 affordable units. This is exactly what we need to see happening in the city. And it's really tremendous work to get it to this point. I can't wait to see it come to fruition. The second one I wanted to comment on is item 9, number 2.7, the roadmap. And you'll see, colleagues, there's a lot of details in there about how we're going to get to the 3,000 affordable units, broad strokes, where they're going to come from, and how we're going to get there. And I think it's really starting to sketch out a path to get to this vision that the mayor had mentioned in the State of the City address, and then we endorsed just a little while after that to say we need to get to 3,000 units over the next 5 years. It's a mix, obviously, of building new things, subsidizing the construction of new housing units, doing things like rent supplements, to make sure that we can make existing units more affordable for people without having to wait for the time it takes to build them. And I think it's a really comprehensive approach to the issue of affordable housing. So happy to put the whole thing on the floor. I wanted to draw your attention to those two, which are obviously very important when it comes to affordable housing in our city.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions with respect to the CAPS report? I'd like to turn the chair then over to the Deputy Mayor.
I have the Mayor.
Thanks very much. And colleagues, there's 2 items that I would like to bring to your attention. One that Councillor Helmer already has brought to your attention, which is the roadmap to 3,000 affordable units. You'll note that in committee this received unanimous support. But to the credit of this council, this has gotten strong support every step of the way, and I'd like to acknowledge all of you. This is such an important leadership role that all members of council are playing to take care of those who sometimes just need a hand up or are less able to care for themselves or just by being able to provide additional supports that are in place and necessary. So I want to say thank you for what you've done in the past. I look forward to your continued support for this for every good reason that calls London the great caring community that it is. And I just want to say from my heart, thank you very much to all members of council and to all the staff that have put such tremendous work into this effort as well. This hasn't happened by accident, but the great work of staff to make this what it is today. And we will be looking at senior levels of government for support, and those discussions are taking place even now. Colleagues, the other one is a little different, but it's 2.5, the sports court donation by Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. You'll recall it was some weeks back that we had both the Toronto Raptors and the Toronto Maple Leafs Old Timers alumni play at the Budweiser Gardens. And I have to tell you, it was not only a great success to have those 2 terrific teams in our city, but Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment Foundation made a point of contributing $250,000 to be able to provide a sports court right here. Their expense, their engineering, the location to be confirmed, but let me tell you how generous of them. And I just want to say on behalf of our city, how grateful we are for their tremendous contribution. It reminds me of what Hully Gully did not so long ago as well, when they made a decision to upgrade a number of parks in this community. And that's about corporations, corporate Canada, corporate London, doing things for the greater good of this city for our kids. And I just want to give them all a shout out for their great work. Thanks very much. Back over to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I put myself on the speaker's list while I had the liberty to do so, but I'll turn the chair back to you.
So noted. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Further to the comments that Councillor Helmer made, I want to just say a couple of things on the road to 3,000, the roadmap to 3,000. And I want to compliment the mayor for his vision on this. As Councillor Helmer said, this was something that came up in the State of the City address. Up until that point, I think council had been, very united on funding the housing portfolio, housing, homelessness, helping the most vulnerable. Our multi-year budget had a historic amount of investment, and I think what the mayor did is he took that and he went all in on it, and he said, we got to up the bar here. We got to set some targets, and we got to find a way to do that. And so, kudos to him for having the vision to to set the direction for council, something that we could all rally behind, something that we have all gotten behind, and something that we now have the framework of a plan to try to bring to fruition. And I want to thank the incredible amount of work that our staff have done to pull this plan together. It's bold. There are certainly risks associated with it, but the risk of doing nothing, I think, is much greater. And so kudos to the mayor for his vision on this, and many thanks to all members of council who have been so supportive of our file. People often like to talk about the things we disagree on. This is something that we are 100% united on moving forward.
Thank you. Other comments or questions, colleagues? Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had the privilege of speaking with the late Pam McConnell, who was the Deputy Mayor of Toronto. She actually gave me an entire day. And if anyone knew Ms. McConnell, that was a precious commodity. And I'm always very grateful for that time she spent with me. And we were talking about we were in the midst of working on the London for All report that eventually was endorsed by council. And she was talking to me about the Toronto poverty reduction strategy that was a 2-year project. And specific to the idea of dealing with issues around poverty, she said something to me which I always think about when I'm looking at all the things that has been happening in the area of housing and homelessness. She said a wave like this comes along about once every 10 years. And the wave she was talking about was where all levels of government were in alignment to deal with a specific problem. And it feels like we are on a wave where we're talking about housing and homelessness and how we deal with that across the country, and not just in these isolated responses in a local region. So we're riding a wave right now. And I think there is a real desire, ambition, push to solve this problem across the country. So I'm really grateful to all the levels of government that have made it possible for us to be ambitious. And I want to thank city staff, because they are, as always, when opportunities come up, especially funding streams from other levels of government, our city staff are ready, willing, and able to. They've already got the plans in place. They've already done the thinking, and they're ready to just move forward. And I'm extremely grateful for how flexible and nimble and thoughtful, and everything you already said too, Mr. Mayor, how much our city staff are able to just hit the ground running with such a huge problem. I also want to remind council that not only did we put in an historic investment in our multi-year budget for housing and homelessness that we had never done previously, not to that level, we also found money or brought money back in from the Medical Innovation and Research Network that wasn't being used. And with Mr. Hayward's recommendation, we put that money towards this as well. So every level of government, including our own, has made significant investments in this. I'm really pleased with this plan. I'm really hopeful with this plan. And I'm happy and anxious to see how it plays out and how we move it forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you too for your vision and setting that goal for us, for this council and for the city.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'd like to just a general reminder to Councillor Salee. I note here that you recused yourself in item 2.3 in committee. You may wish to acknowledge that again. Can I turn it over to you for a moment, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On 2.3, as I work for the federal government in relations to the immigration partnership with Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. So I'll declare a conflict on that. My apologies.
Okay, so we will call all but 2.3 if we can through you, Chair, at the right time. Any other comments or questions? Back to you, Councillor Helmer.
Thank you, and sorry for not catching that. That's it.
So then we'll call all but 2.3. Let's call the vote, please.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Helmer.
Item 2.3, which is number 7 in the agenda tonight, the agreement for London and Middlesex Local Immigration Partnership. On the floor, Councillor Slees declared pecuniary interest.
Thank you. Let's call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14 with 1 recuse.
That it, Councillor Hummer? Thank you. Corporate Services Committee, I'll call on Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Your Worship. And it was the final meeting of the Corporate Services term, and I did not remember to thank the committee for their service and to thank city staff for all the good work they did for the year. So I do that now. I'll put the entire report on the floor. I have not been told that anyone would like anything pulled.
Does anyone wish to have anything dealt with separately? Back to you, Councillor Cassidy.
I have no comment, Your Worship. I'll just put the whole report on the.
So noted. Any other comments or questions then for this report? I see none. We'll call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries.
Councillor Cassidy.
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. For the 15th report of Civic Works, I'll call on Councillor Pelosi, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have not been given notice of anything to be pulled separate.
Well, let's ask that question then. Anyone wish to have any of these items dealt with independently? Back to you, Councillor Pelosi.
Thank you. I will be putting items 1 through 11 on the floor. I want to start off by thanking the members of the Civic Works Committee, being Councillor Helmer, Councillor Cassidy, Councillor Van Meerbruggen, Councillor Turner, myself, and the Mayor. It's been great work throughout this last year and lots to be done. The main highlights of this report is item 2.1. It's not our normal traffic bylaw amendments. This is a complete change and different ways and consolidations to how we do some of these processes, putting an admin focus on it and making things faster to be a service to Londoners. Item 6 being 2.5 is the commemorative naming of city assets. This is an expansion of the street naming. The city has recognized that we have different naming policies for recreation complexes, park benches, streets, and a consolidation of that, recognizing our policies have been not updated since 1994. And item 8 being 4.1 is the new sidewalks in established neighborhood, looking at doing things differently as we move forward, as we've had some trouble in the past. So staff has been working hard behind the scenes to rectify that. And a special thank you to staff on item 2.6, which doesn't look overly exciting from the outside, but this was essential services we need to bring in for split stream rear loading waste collection trucks. The city is starting to encounter some different supply chain issues, and this one staff went above and beyond behind the scenes to bring together different vendors to make the project still happen on budget and on time to service Londoners. So that is the highlight of Civic Works from the 15th meeting.
Thank you. I didn't realize that split stream rear loading waste collection was the highlight, but it's all good, I think, frankly. There we go. Comments, other comments or questions for Civic Works? Councillor Hopkins, please.
Yeah, I would like to make a comment on 4.2, number 9, and 4.1, number 8. And I'd like to start off, first of all, with 4.2, which is the new sidewalk project list for 2022. And I want to pass on my personal thanks to staff for getting a number of sidewalks in the Byron community area. I think we all know as councillors how residents cherish their neighborhoods, and moving around safely is very important. And putting in sidewalks and connectivity is going to keep this certain area in Byron a lot safer as residents move to and from schools. And back in the 50s, it was suburbia, and we didn't build sidewalks, we built wide roads and accommodated a lot of cars. And now we are seeing the challenges of those wide roads, and opportunities to put sidewalks in and for residents to move safely is very much appreciated. So thanks to staff for a number of sidewalks happening in the Byron area. I would also like to make a comment on 4.1, which is the new sidewalks in established neighborhoods. I think that is something I'm really supportive of doing. I have, for the past couple years, worked with two neighborhoods in the Byron area. And sometimes we get a sidewalk that comes up on a list and it may not be the right sidewalk. And having a discussion in the neighborhood has become a valuable tool to use, where it allows the community to give input to staff to listen to the neighborhood concerns, and then come up with a plan that it's going to do, it's going to work for the community. And of course, it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be some concern, but the information and that community engagement is so important. So I'm really looking forward to, when I saw this come forward, it was like, when can I get Lambeth on the list? And I hope, really look forward to further community engagement with this new way of establishing how we're going to look at sidewalks. So thanks very much to the committee for supporting this new way of looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Van Meerbergen, please.
Thank you, Mayor. As well, 4.1, number 8, new sidewalks in established neighborhoods. I mean, we saw firsthand earlier this year, I think it was 8 streets, which did not go ahead with proposed sidewalks. Because it's a reminder to all of us that we have to actually listen to the people that we serve in our areas. Some of these streets really do not warrant a sidewalk in any way, shape, or form. Very small crescents, what have you, short streets, very low traffic count, no real safety hazard there. And when you're looking at mature areas, quite often these places were never built contemplating a sidewalk going through a lawn. And in many cases, these roads are so narrow that you can't extend the sidewalk out into the street even if you wanted to, so you end up cutting that lawn even more. So, I mean, several of us went through this earlier in the spring. And some of these people are well into their late 70s, 80s. They've raised their families in these areas, and it's devastating in many cases to them to see this come blowing through their properties. And I think this is a step in maybe the right direction to at least listening to see if they're indeed wanted and needed.
Thank you very much. I next have on my list Councillor Lewis, please.
Thank you, Worship. I also want to talk about the new sidewalks in existing neighborhoods proposal and speak in favor of it. And I want to take the opportunity in particular to thank Ms. Dan for all the work that she's put into this. I know that this was quite an undertaking. I know that there's been some controversial in the neighborhood decisions that have been before council, and I think that this is going to provide a much smoother path forward in having the discussions, not just with the residents on the street, but those on the neighboring streets who are impacted by these decisions as well. During the summer, Ms. Dan came out for a visit to Ward 2 and walked a couple sidewalks in my neighborhood that are in need of some repair, and we had an opportunity to talk a little bit about the sidewalk plans in general, and I see some of the things that we talked about reflected in the recommendation she's making here, and so I really appreciate her taking the time to come out and see for herself what was happening in a couple of my neighborhoods, but for all the work that went into this, it's much appreciated. I will share with council, I reflect on Buchan Road in my ward, which had a sidewalk installed in the late summer. And there was not huge amounts of support for it at first, but staff listened, and what we had, what eventually came forward, was a design that was not going to impact the boulevard trees. We were going to preserve those 40-plus-year-old trees, and we accomplished the sidewalk installation on one side of the road only through road narrowing. A week or so ago, I was out on Wexford Ave doing a little canvas and chatted with a mom who was walking over to Lord Nelson School to pick up her son. And she's a resident on Buchan Road. She was using that sidewalk and wanted to thank me and to express to staff her thanks for how it turned out, because she wasn't so sure at first that she wanted it, and she wanted those trees preserved, and now she sees the benefit of it. But it was through those neighborhood conversations that the opposition was overcome. And what I see in this report is an opportunity to expand on those conversations. And I think about Buchan Road because it's not just the residents of Buchan who are impacted. Both on Bonaventure Drive and on Admiral Drive, we have transit service. So we have riders getting on and off of buses and walking into that neighborhood. We have schools on both ends. So we have families walking, whether it's for an after-school activity, you know, your after-school activities aren't always at your home school. Sometimes you're playing the school down the road in your basketball game or your volleyball game or what have you. So there's a lot of pedestrian activity in the area, and that connector is going to be a really important piece moving forward. But it was done through building some consensus on what was going to work. And that's what I see in this plan is working towards building consensus instead of dividing. And so, again, I just want to express my full support and my thanks to staff who put in the time on this.
Thank you. I have next Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to echo some of those thoughts of my colleagues, I think communication is absolutely imperative. This is helpful. Hopefully, this will address some of the barriers in terms of sidewalks and mobility within the community. I really hope that it doesn't impair our ability to ensure mobility for all. And I'd like to just correct something that Councillor Van Meerbergen stated. The city doesn't install sidewalks on people's private property. They install sidewalks on city property. And that's a really important distinction, because this is something, a misapprehension that's been held throughout the communities every time we go through these discussions, because people think it's their properties that are being, where incursions occur. And that's not true. It's a very well thought out process and very clearly identified to happen within the city right of way. So anyway, I just wanted to make that comment. I hope that we can, with this, find some peace and start moving forward, because this is a very essential component of London Plan, of our mobility planning, our ability to make sure that this is a city that's inclusive and safe for all. Because I think the debates we've had in the past have been really not productive and have really damaged our ability to provide for residents the things that we need to do.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Well, I see none. So with that, let's call the vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Thank you. I think Councillor Pelosi, I think we're good.
Yeah, that concludes the 15th report of the Civic Works Committee.
Thank you very much. Well, you're back on again. We have the 17th report of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee. I'll call on Councillor Pelosi to present the report.
Thank you, Your Worship. This was the meeting we had last Monday, which was the public participation meeting component. This communication receives the written correspondence and the people who attended virtually to present to us. I will put items 1 and 2 on the floor.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? You wish to have these dealt with separately? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, Your Worship. I hope this is the appropriate time. I would like to bring forward a deferral based on the public comments. And public comments, first of all, I want to thank everyone for attending the public participation meeting budget. There was an ask from Sandy Levin regarding our ESAs, and I would like just to add that I'm not sure if I need to put the deferral on the floor first and then speak to it, but the deferral would be that.
Well, I may, actually, if I might, I might refer back to the clerk on this because whether you've asked the question whether this is the appropriate place for this. This was a public participation meeting. And I've been advised that it should be raised when we deal with the issues of the budget later in December, but I wonder if the clerk can confirm if I'm on the right track with that or not, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the only item before you tonight with respect to the budget is to receive the comments from the public. The debate regarding the budget would happen at the December 21st meeting, so the councillor may, if the intent is to raise additional motion for additional funds for a certain matter, that would be more appropriate when you're debating the budget.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you for that clarification. I think it's important. If I may, through you, Your Worship, to the clerks, when would the appropriate time through the budget process be brought forward, the deferral based on the request at this participation meeting? Just so I can get clarification, because the budget is quite a long process there.
Clerk?
Through Mr. Mayor, I just need clarification. Referral of what are you asking to refer?
No, I think at this point we're not talking referral. I don't mean to put words in the councillor's mouth, but I think what she's saying is if it's not appropriate this time, when would be the appropriate time to bring that forward for budget consideration? Is that fair, Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah. So the deferral that I was suggesting would have come from Sandy Levin's request for support for our ESAs through consideration of adding the $100,000 through the reserve fund. And that was the request through the public participation meeting. And the deferral that I was suggesting would be based on those comments presented at the public participation meeting, that we have staff and work with a business case. So in Upper Thames, so it's the team that has that service agreement, and upon conversations with staff, they would like a business case brought forward. So I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to bring that forward, or where would it be in the budget process?
Yeah, I think we addressed that this wasn't the appropriate form, but I want to come back to the clerk and based on the explanation of the councillor, just to clarify when in the budget process might be the appropriate time for this to be brought forward and dealt with.
Through Mr. Mayor, at the December 21st meeting, when you're discussing the budget, you could certainly bring forward a motion to either add that amount to amend the budget to add that amount, or you could delay the approval of the budget if you want to refer it back to have a business case prepared for Upper Thames budget to be increased.
Are you good, Councillor Hopkins?
No, because I'm not being very clear then. This isn't an Upper Thames UTRCA request. This is coming from Sandy Levin, and it's based on the team
But because it's a financial issue, the PPM is not the place where that it is dealt with, and this is the receiving of the report of the PPM. So I think what you're hearing from the clerk is trying to give you an avenue where that can be dealt with for that purpose. But this PPM, this specific and special SPPC meeting is not the venue for that consideration, but could well be dealt with in December 21st council meeting. Go ahead.
Thank you for that, Your Worship, and I will hope and rely on staff to point that process out and the requests for a business case moving forward.
Thank you very much. Any other comment?
Just one moment.
Oh, go ahead, please. Sorry.
If I may, Your Worship, if I can go to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Westlake Power, I wasn't at the budget meeting, so I didn't hear the discussion, and I understand you were provided with advice to raise it tonight at tonight's council meeting, so I just want to clarify that that's, I guess, was the advice that was given at the meeting, and I wasn't at the meeting, so I just wanted to let you know that.
Well, now that's an interesting little wicket. I wonder if the deputy clerk has any other help that she can provide to give us some wisdom here as to why it might be dealt with in this particular section versus what I believe should be a budget item. So, but please, if any help you can provide, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you. I will try. Through the chair, I was contacted with respect to the request that was made at the PPM and whether or not it would be appropriate to raise that during the budget deliberations meeting that was held last week, or whether that should be done here at council. And both alternatives were put forward, but this is the first I'm hearing about a deferral. The motion that was provided was an additional direction to Civic administration. So I'm not clear on what we're looking to put on the floor.
Do you want to clarify what you're looking to put on the floor? And I may deem it appropriate or not, but it's not a question of ignoring the issue. It's just trying to find the right spot for it. So go ahead, Councillor Hopkins.
My apologies for confusing the matter by using the word deferral, and maybe it's a directive that I'd like to bring forward then.
So, Clerk, does that mean you got the appropriate wording for this? Because I would deem this is a budget item, not for SPPC. But you know what, since we always look for a little bit of wisdom from those with a little more experience than I do on such matters, Councillor Turner, what is your quick thought on this?
Thank you, Your Worship. You humble me some days. My thoughts on this, perhaps it might be helpful if we do have this discussion on the 21st. I think the intent was that we couldn't discuss it at our budget deliberations because we hadn't received the report from SPPC from the budget PPM. This is the first time we're receiving it in council. It's important information, so it would be a little off kilter to have brought forward a recommendation during the budget deliberations when we hadn't formally, as a council, received the recommendation from the budget PPM process. So now with this, this is kind of tied with one of the proposals that existed in the budget, one of the business cases, amendments, I guess, associated with the invasive species management. I think when we discussed that on December 21st, this would probably be the appropriate time to bring that forward as an amendment or as an additional recommendation. This one is a piece that can be addressed midstream. It doesn't have to be funded during the budget because the source of funding would be reserves, so it doesn't have any levy impacts. If at some point the Upper Thames were to bring forward a business case, we could consider that at any point during the calendar year and look for opportunities there. So I think that's probably the best, perhaps if that's helpful, a way to handle it, and we can have that discussion on the 21st.
Are we good with that, Councillor? Thank you very much, Councillor Turner. Are we good with that for the moment, Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
If that's the appropriate channel, then I will be bringing forward that directive through the budget process.
So noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. Councillor Pelosi, I think you had the report on the table, the full report of November 17th, or pardon me, of
Yes.
the 17th meeting, November 29th? Any
Yes,
other,
items 1 and 2 are on the floor.
any other comments or questions? Thanks very much. Let's call the question.
The motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Pelosi, I think that's it.
Includes that SPPC report, and I will certainly reach out to Councillor Hopkins and make sure that any wording that she wishes to do is circulated ahead of time, and I'll be aware of which items to pull for the 21st. Thank you.
You make it very easy. Thank you very much. Now for the 18th report of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee, I'll look to the Deputy Mayor to present the report, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And before I present the report, I just wanted to say a brief comment. I want to apologize to my colleagues for being distracted at the time of chairing this meeting. I was getting some information about the accident that had happened at Riverside and Wonderland at the time. And as people have subsequently known, both my wife and I know one of the families involved, as well as there are individuals at the school she's principal impacted. So I had a little bit more information than may have been publicly available. It was a very distracting. It was a very distracting piece of information to have, and I may have presented the governance working report with a little bit of distraction in the back of my mind. So I wanted to apologize to colleagues for that, and I wasn't able to share it at the time because I certainly didn't know what was public and what wasn't at that time. With that, though, I'm happy to present the 18th report of SPPC, and there are three matters that, at least three matters that I think we should deal with separately. One matter is 4.9, the fourth and fifth reports of governance working group. There was a conflict on 4.10, which was the London Public Library Board director's vacancy, and we've referred some items to 5.1, the governance working group membership, of which we received some correspondence from colleagues. I'd like to deal with those three separately, which means I'd have numbers 1 to 13 to present, unless any colleagues would like something in that 1 to 13 range dealt with separately.
Colleagues, do you wish any of 1 through 13 dealt with independently? So that's what we'll be dealing with now. Back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, so I'll put those items on the floor then.
Comments or questions on items 1 through 13? I see none. We'll call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, to help with the presentation of this 4.9, it's probably best to turn to the SPPC report that's in colleagues' package on pages 7 and 8. You'll see the consolidated recommendations that came from SPPC related to that item. There's A through E. I know I've been asked to deal with C separately, so I guess I would ask colleagues if there's some comfort level in dealing with the rest and then C separately, or if there are other items in that list that anyone would like to vote on separately.
So we've been asked, colleagues, to deal with C independently. Does anyone wish to have any other item dealt with, discussed, voted on separately? Councillor Hummer, please.
A.
Now, is that A, I, all of them? I just want to be clear, Councillor Hummer, please.
All of them, I think, is simplest for everyone, unless.
Yep, no, I think you're right. So A and C are being considered to be dealt with separately. Anything else, colleagues? So if you're comfortable, the Deputy Mayor has put the balance on the floor. And if there's no discussion, Councillor Turner, sorry. Go ahead.
I think B probably as well. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time following along between the 3 different agendas here. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting the right clauses.
Yeah.
Is B the actions with respect to the general operations municipal council?
Correct.
That's the one that references in BI, the 1 p.m. start of term council in 2022, yeah. Councillor Turner.
So that one out separately as well, please.
Okay, all of B. So that leaves D and E. Anything else there, Councillor or Deputy Mayor Helmer?
No, I think D and E are easy to deal with. I'll deal with the rest separately. So maybe for simplicity, let's just go in order, given, so I'll put 4.1A on the floor. A is the changes related to the council member expense policy. There are several sub-items related to that, and so I'll put all of them on the floor, and we can divide up the votes as colleagues see fit, unless colleagues just want to vote on the whole thing.
So we are, colleagues, just for the benefit of everyone, we are on page 7 of the 18th meeting of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee report. 4.9A is now on the floor. Comments or questions? Councillor Armour, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to clarify the content of A2. We dealt with this at Sppc, and my understanding was there was an amendment from Councillor Cassidy, which was the opposite of what's in front of us, and that was passed. So it's a bit confusing to me why that recommendation, at least in what I'm seeing in eScribe, A2 is still there.
I'll either go to the Deputy Mayor or the Clerk for that clarification. We do recall routers and other things became quite the discussion point, which we don't need to rediscuss tonight, for the record, but I think that is a fair comment that from committee, that seemed to be something different than what we see here. I wonder if we get some clarification.
Yeah, I'm going to ask the clerks to clarify. The report that came forward from the governance working group had an exclusion from home internet costs in it. The committee decision was to strike that piece. And so I don't know if this is worded in the reverse, but I would need the clerks to confirm that indeed what we would be passing from the committee's recommendations would be that we struck that chunk out, and so home internet expenses would be allowed.
Let's go to the clerk then, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe that the confusion is created because of the combination of the 4th and the 5th reports. It was the 4th report that directed Civic Administration to report back to the GWG with that proposal. And then in the subsequent report, in the 5th report, it was excluded. So I think that's where the language is creating the confusion, but the attached draft policy does not include home internet as an exclusion.
Perhaps I could turn colleagues' attention to page 11 of that report and the motion moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Hopkins, that was passed 12-3, deleting the reference but excluding home internet cost, services, or equipment. Deputy Mayor.
Well, I understand the councillor's confusion. I would look to the clerks on how to properly deal with anybody who would like to vote separately on those components. Given the way that the report is formatted, it would prove challenging to do so, although I would agree that the attached policy does reflect what we passed at the SPPC meeting.
Perhaps I could ask before we do that, if there's anything else in A that colleagues would like to have dealt with separately, if in fact that becomes the appropriate way to deal with that, even though it was dealt with by amendment. So it was put in the main motion, colleagues, and then withdrawn a couple of pages later, and I'm not sure if that is sufficiently satisfactory. Let's go to the clerk and get some clarity.
Thank you. Through the chair. So again, part A is the direction that Civic Administration received at the 4th meeting, which we brought back to the 5th meeting. And then at the 5th meeting, there was a recommendation that came forward. And at SPPC, that motion was defeated, and the new revised attached council member expense policy is Part D of this recommendation. So Part A is just the direction to staff to report back at the following 5th meeting of the GWG. So that's already been done, and then that wasn't adopted by the SPPC as noted in Part D.
Well, that's clearer. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, so I think it'd be best to go back to Councillor Helmer on how he'd like to deal with that, because that makes sense to me from the clerk's perspective, but I agree the language would be awkward from a putting your vote on the floor perspective.
Yeah, there is some confusion. I appreciate that because we're dealing with the 4th and the 5th reports of the governance working group. Councillor Helmer.
So thank you for pointing that out. And I feel kind of silly for not catching the thing that I complained about extensively at our SPPC meeting. Of course, it has confused me once again. So for myself anyway, having Part A altogether is fine. It's just the direction to report back. And that's already happened. It's kind of ridiculous to vote against it. I mean, I still will vote against it, but it's not really very meaningful. And then Part B, I think, deal with that separately. Part C, definitely I think needs to be separate. And then D also, because that incorporates all the changes that are really articulated in the A that made it through SPPC. That's all I would really need. I don't need to vote separately on each of the components of A. That will just drag it out.
Well, yep. So the good news is, Councillor, we're probably 60 minutes ahead of the last committee meeting when we discussed this. So we have A on the table, as is. Any other comments or questions? I know Councillor Cassidy has none. Sorry, of course, if you do. All right. Seeing none, we'll call the vote on A. Sorry, Councillor Cassidy.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-2.
Deputy Mayor.
The components of Part B on separately, there are 2 pieces. The first one that I'll put on is B1, which is the direction to Civic Administration to make the changes to council meetings to be held at 1 p.m. Beginning with the 2022 term of council. There's an it being noted clause associated with that too, but I will put that item on the floor.
Okay, noting that we did discuss this at some length in SPPC, I wonder if colleagues have any other comments they wish to make. Councillor Turner, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. I won't belabor this. I recognize that I was in a substantial minority on this, but I think it still needs to be recognized. What's being done here basically excludes anybody who's working full-time shifts or regular days or whatever from being able to really functionally attend council meetings. The SPPCs will continue to be at 4 o'clock, but council will happen at 1. And so it's going to be hard to have a foot in each land to be able to do that. One of Councillor Van Meerbergen made good points the other day. The challenge with what we do at council really requires a good understanding of governance, a good understanding of human resources, a good understanding of budgeting, a good understanding of policy, a good understanding of legislation. These are things that that a lot of people have, and some people don't. You can either acquire that through work or you can acquire it through life experience, but most of it is usually acquired through work and school. And the people who have those experiences in significant amounts to be able to bring to the table at City Council are ones who have that career experience to be able to have those discussions. Discounting those would make it really hard to bring good quality candidates to the table. It's going to, I've already spoken to a few people who've said this discounts them from being able to run in 2022, which is disappointing. And I recognize the discussions and points of my colleagues who say that council in general right now disqualifies others from being able to run. I recognize that and I understand that too. The people who have the experience in human resources, budgeting, governance, legislation, strategy, those kind of things, are people who make more than what council pays. And for those people to leave their careers for 4 years for no guarantee of continued employment beyond that, for changing salary streams by a fairly significant margin, would find themselves not really attracted to these positions on city council. So I know the vote will probably go down exactly the way it did last week, but I'd urge you to have some pause and consider what the impact of this decision might be.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions colleagues have? I see none. We'll call the question. This is, we are dealing with BI or B1. Thank you.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 12-3.
BII on the floor, which is the direction to Civic Administration to report back to the Governance Working Group with respect to recommendations related to the survey results and other feedback related to the staff support model in the Councillor's office in capturing the themes of increased resources, more flexibility in support duties. So I'll put that one on the floor.
Comments or questions, colleagues? I see none. We'll call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Deputy Mayor.
I'll put C on the floor. C is a referral of clause 3.1 from the 5th report to a future meeting of the Governance Working Group in order to invite all members of current advisory committees to have a discussion with GWG on this matter. If you want to see the items that are in clause 3.1, they are at the bottom of page 10 and kind of go on to page 11. So it is a referral of those items into a process where GWG would consult with the advisory committees on those recommendations that were made.
Comments or questions? I see Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, colleagues. I voted against this referral at committee. I'm rising now because I'd like to propose an amendment to this. I think it's important, if we're going to send this back, that there's at least some direction from us to focus, not to the exclusion of others, but to focus on a particular item that I heard was a concern for folks, and that's the pausing of and populating of some committees and how that's going to be handled. So I would like to suggest that this be amended by adding at the end of the clause to read, including specific dialogue to include discussion related to the proposed pause of populating some committees and the associated discussion with respect to the proposed committees / task forces for the Master Mobility Plan and the Climate Emergency Action Plan. And I'll look to see if there's a seconder for that, and then I'd like to offer a little bit more comment on my reason for seeking this amendment.
Okay, I'm trying also to see if that's, well, let's first see if there's a seconder for that. I see Councillor Van Meerbergen seconding. I'm not sure. Clerks, do you have all of that? They say yes, so we'll have a chance to review that as it's discussed. Councillor Lewis, you're on deck. Good.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think any discussion that we have with the advisory committees in terms of this governance working group report, when those meetings are called by the chair, I think it's really important that we have a discussion with them, particularly on the pausing of these three committees. I know that that was one of the things in the recommendations that not everyone was comfortable with. And I'm really mindful of the discussion that was had at GWG by the members around and with our staff about the overlap and redundancy that we may get from the Master Mobility Plan and the Integrated Transportation Advisory Committee, as well as the overlap that we might get with the Climate Emergency Action Plan, along with the Ecological Stewardship Advisory Committee, and the name is going to escape me with the new name for EPAC, but the two committees that will be dealing with issues around our environment and where the overlap can be there. So I think it's really important, if we're going to take the time to have a referral back to discuss the report in general, that part of the dialogue is focused around this particular item. I think one of the goals that we were trying to achieve in looking at restructuring of the advisory committees, in fact, I know it was one of the goals, was that we were looking to reduce overlap and redundancy in some of the committee work, realize some efficiencies there, and get some good advice back. And I think that what we've seen with the Master Mobility Plan and the Climate Emergency Action Plan suggestions that have come forward is, once again, we would have a considerable amount of overlap. So if we're going to take time to consult with the committees, I would really like at least part of that discussion to be focused specifically on this. To me, I see there being an opportunity to discuss with the committee, rather than creating these new task forces, do we direct these to those appropriate committees for them to take on to their work plan. I think the Master Mobility Plan, for example, would rightly be the purview of the Integrated Transportation Committee, but I think that there might be a role for the Accessibility Advisory Committee in that consultation as well. I think that, as I mentioned, there are two committees working on environmental issues that I think the Climate Emergency Action Plan suggestion that came from EPAC through PEC might also be something that's assigned to those committees as part of their work plan, rather than creating wholly independent ones, or that we maybe are populating those two items with members to represent a joint committee meeting, where we bring the two committees together to discuss those items at a particular meeting. I think it's worth having the discussion, and we heard from Mr. Hill about you know, how the structures and the formalities sometimes don't allow the committees to do what they want. I think this is one of those examples where, if we discuss with them the potential for a joint committee meeting on a topic like the mobility plan, if we discuss with them these items coming to them as meaningful parts of their work plan, which is consistent with some of the other recommended terms of reference, I think it's worth having that discussion with them. To me, if we're just going to have a referral, to have a discussion that's based around the status quo, I'm not interested in doing that, but I am interested in hearing their thoughts on how we can perhaps not pause these three committees, but let them be populated and move forward with some meaningful work too. So I hope colleagues will take that in the spirit as intended and support this amendment.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Councillor Elmer, please.
Just on the amendment through the mayor, I wonder if Councillor Lewis could clarify. It sounds like you're just adding on a specific topic to a general discussion. So this is not narrowing the discussion, it's just making sure that this particular thing would be discussed when we have the a meeting at governance working group. Is that the idea?
Let's ask Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Councillor Helmer, thanks for the question. Yes, that is the idea, that it doesn't preclude the What I don't want is for this particular topic to get general discussion. And so putting an emphasis on making sure that this is part of it, not to the exclusion of all the other topics, but that it's really focused in that this is going to be an item that is raised and consulted on.
Councillor Hummer.
Great, I support the amendment. Good idea.
Any other comments? I see none. We'll call the question.
Councillor Cassidy, Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Yep, just reading and trying to digest. This was sort of sprung on me at the last minute.
I vote yes.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
So a couple of ways we can proceed with this, and Deputy Mayor, I'll get your thoughts on this, whether we now deal with this as amended or whether we deal with that a little later on. Your pleasure.
Yeah, well, C was amended, so I think I'm happy to move C as amended. I think I need a seconder now that it's been amended, though.
Do you have a seconder for that? I see Councillor Lewis seconding that. Not sure if there's any other new comments or questions on this as amended. Councillor Cassidy.
Again, this was even more confusing than it was at SPPC. I don't see C anywhere on the page. I'm not sure what we're voting on, is what I'm saying.
I'm happy to help clarify if I can. So on page 8 of the committee report, there is item C, which is the referral of clause 3.1 to the governance working group to do the things that it says in clause C. The items in clause 3.1 you can find on page 10 of the report if you want to review them. And then council successfully just passed an amendment which would include a specific focus that I would say adds to that list of things that we would be consulting on. So C as amended is as it is there, plus the amendment we just passed.
Councillor Cassidy, is that helpful? Thank you. Then I have Councillor Hopkins, please.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and my apologies if I'm a little confused myself. I know we're dealing with advisory groups and we're talking about a public participation meeting in the future. Is this the opportunity to ask a question around advisory groups? It was suggested here that we are going to be pausing the advisory groups as set up now, and I just would like further clarification that we are not pausing. I know I've had questions raised by the public. Are we ending our advisory groups as of December 31st, 2021? I'm not exactly sure where we are and if advisory groups are going to come up further down the line in these amendments that we're making. I'm not sure. That's why I'm
well, let's refer that back to the Deputy Mayor and see if we can help clarify what's going on here.
Yeah. The governance working group made a recommendation which included all of those things, including the pausing of the committees. None of that was enacted upon by SPPC, nor did it come to council in that form. All of it was referred back to the advisory committees for another round of consultation with them on that recommendation that came through governance working group with the addition now of the amendment. And so As governance working group chair, could tell you my intent would be to consult on all of the stuff that was in that item that came before SPPC, including the addition today, with the existing advisory committees.
Is that helpful, Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, it is very helpful. So in other words, we have not made a decision on advisory groups. So I would ask the question through you, Your Worship, to clerk. Are we going to continue with what we've been doing with advisory groups until council makes a decision on advisory groups, is my question.
That question's been directed to the clerk with respect to ongoing support of all advisory groups.
Thank you. Through the chair, that is our intention, is that they would continue. We would convene the existing members as required until such time as council directs otherwise.
Councillor Hopkins, is that helpful?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Van Holst, I see you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just note that we may have to set up another meeting with the governance working group and the advisory committee members. I don't know that the items listed here are necessarily the ones that are most important to them to discuss. It seemed like there were some other issues that were important that may not be included in these, but we can certainly cover these as an initial consultation.
Thanks very much. Any other comments or questions from colleagues? So this is the amended C, and with that, we will call the question.
Councillor Van Meerbergen?
I vote yes.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Colleagues, before I turn it back to the Deputy Mayor, it's my intention to check the pulse, assuming we have pulses when this particular SPPC report's done. I'm sure we do, to determine if you want to take a brief break. So you'll consider that. We have a confidential session as the final item to deal with, unless there are any other matters brought forward by colleagues. So with that, I'll turn it back to the Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Van Meerbergen has his hand up, Your Worship.
Councillor Van Meerbergen, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, as well. I made a mistake, sadly, in voting earlier, 4.9B small I on the 1 o'clock start time. Mistakenly informed by the clerk that possible reconsideration could happen under emergent motions. I just wanted to bring that up. Uh-oh. Hello?
So, yeah, no, I'm conferring with the clerk. I'm sorry, Councillor Van Meerbergen. I always get wisdom as I need it from people who are smarter than me, which is pretty much everyone in this room and on Zoom. So with that, you have asked for reconsideration of one particular item.
Correct. 4.9 BI, the 1 o'clock start time.
It's been suggested that that you deal with it under emergent motions in the agenda. I'll call for that and look for you if that's all right.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor. Oh, did someone else have their hand up? I apologize. All right, back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, so the next item in this report is D, which is the consolidated changes to the council members' expense policy. It is attached to the report. It includes, I believe, if I remember correctly, all of the changes that were worked on and suggested by the governance working group, with the exclusion of one, which was in the original government GWG recommendation. It excluded home internet. That was struck, and so that would be permissive now in this iteration of the council expense policy. So I'll put D, which is the approval of that updated and document on the floor for approval.
Thanks very much. Comments or questions? I am not seeing any questions. We will call the question.
I'll vote no.
Closing the vote and the motion.
Deputy Mayor.
A number of clauses that were to be received. There's also an it being noted, so I'll put essentially the balance of the report on the floor.
This is the balance of the report, colleagues. Any comments or questions? I see none. We will call the question.
I'll vote yes.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Okay, that completes Sppc agenda. Item 15 was asked to be separated due to a conflict. It is an appointment to the London Public Library Board of Directors. I will put that on the floor.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions? Seeing none, we will call the question.
I'll vote yes.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 4.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor.
Item 16 is governance working group membership. If colleagues will recall, at additional business, I inquired as to the process for adding new members to governance working group. It is down to a committee of 4. We earlier in the meeting referred 2 pieces of correspondence from 2 different councillors to this part of the agenda, requesting to be appointed to the governance working group. I'd like to do 2 things. One is I'd be happy to move the motion of anyone interested. This is a working group that does not have a cap on membership. Any member of council can basically ask to be added to it. I would also obviously be interested if there's any other councillors at this time who would like to be added. I'd be willing to put their names forward as well.
Might be helpful, Deputy Mayor, if you confirm the 2 individuals that you're referring to.
Yes, both Councillor Cassidy and Councillor Fife-Miller wrote correspondence requesting to be on the committee.
Okay, and colleagues, I just want to stress again that there's no limitation on this committee. This is open to any and all members of council who wish to participate on the governance working group. So with that, I will open that up. If any individual wishes to self-nominate or indicate an interest in participating in the governance working group, I'll recognize Councillor Hammoud.
I'd like to add my name.
Thank you. So noted. Anyone else wish to have their name put forward? So we are acknowledging that we have Councillor Cassidy, Councillor Fife Miller, Councillor Hamou. Do you have a seconder for this? I see Councillor Lewis. Thank you very much. I hate to say last call because I don't mean it sound like we're down at the seeps, but this, as I've indicated, this is an opening that all members of council can participate in. So with that, I will call the question, acknowledging that we have 3 colleagues who have put their names forward.
Councillor Turner?
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Add something to this. Are you done there, Deputy Mayor? Thank you very much. To Councillors Fife Miller, Cassidy, and Hamou, and the current members of the governance working group. You know, when you do this for all of us in terms of looking at the interests of council and in this very specific area. So, and councillors' issues. So we do appreciate and are grateful for all of your contributions, all members of the. And I could generalize and say all members of all committees, but then I won't do that. So colleagues, we've got here a situation. It is now 6:40. We have an emergent motion, which is Councillor Van Meerbergen's reconsideration. We have confidential session, which we're dealing with 4 items. We'll ask the clerk to clarify. I'm not here to presume, and then we go back into public session. I'm not here to presume how long that will all take. I suspect not too long, but I'm at your pleasure whether you want me to carry on with this meeting, or does anyone or some wish to have a 15-minute break? I see Councillor Lewis. What's your thoughts?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to move a 15-minute recess.
Okay, can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Cassidy, let's just do a show of hands. Let's take that for a 15-minute break. It is 6:40. We'll resume at 6:55 and complete our business. And thank you all for this. And to the public, just bear with us a little bit. And our intention is to deal with a couple of small items, I believe, in public session, then go into confidential session, so you're aware, and then come back into public session when that is done. Thank you. Colleagues, can I ask for screens on, please? The clerk advises we have quorum. Colleagues, there are no deferred matters that I've been made aware nor inquiries, but I've been made aware of an emergent motion, and so we seek leave for same. So for that, I will look for a mover. Councillor Fife-Miller, seconder. Thank you very much. This is on the Councillor Van Meerbergen's motion. So with that, this is to seek leave for the emergent motion. With that, we will call the question.
Councillor Helmer and Councillor Lewis. Councillor Lewis?
Just verbally, yes.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
I'll turn it over to Councillor Van Meerbergen. You'd like to put a motion on the floor? Or are we just?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and apologies for this. 4.9 BI, if we could have a reconsideration on that motion, would be appreciated.
And do you have a seconder for that, Councillor Van Meerbergen? I see Councillor Van Holst. Thank you very much. So it's specific to 4.9. Help me, Clerk I.
BI.
BI. Thank you very much. So with that, we will call the question. Oh, Deputy Mayor.
Just a point of order. I believe Councillor Van Meerbergen was on the losing side of that vote, so he can't move the reconsideration. I'd be happy to move it for him.
Move.
Oh, thank you.
No, he voted.
Oh, he voted the wrong way, so he actually was on the winning side. So my mistake. He can't do it.
No, I think we were okay the first time, but if we want to vote.
Join the losing side.
There's a country song in there somewhere. Thank you very much. We'll call the question. Clerk?
Councillor Van Meerbergen, the motion that's on the floor is to whether to allow the reconsideration vote.
Oh, I thought.
I can't say that, but I just wanted to.
I thought we already voted. Okay, thank you.
You may want to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the chair doesn't typically direct votes of council colleagues.
No, I
for the record.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Didn't have my Wheaties.
So you need to change your vote if you wish to do so. Let me clarify. That's up to you.
Yes, I wish to change my vote.
So click voting in progress button.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And the motion carries 15-0.
Well done, Councillor Van Meerbergen. So far, we're getting to a point. This is all good. I'll ask clerk then just to clarify that the motion, which is now being returned to the table for consideration of a vote is there for your consideration. Clerk, I'll look to you. So we'll need a mover and a second to put the motion back on the table. I see. I'll take Deputy Mayor Morgan and seconded by Councillor Lewis. Thank you, or Fife Miller, excuse me. I know there are no comments or questions. This is just for reconsideration of a vote. So with that, we will call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 10-5.
Thanks very much, colleagues. I'm going to turn your attention now to the bylaws. We have bills 1 through 36, and if it's your pleasure, I'm going to include the bylaw 34 relating to Southdale, 99 Southdale in that, unless you want that pulled separately. Otherwise, we'll be voting on bills 1 through 36. With that, then I will look for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Van Meerbergen, seconded by Councillor Fife Miller. Let's call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion.
Colleagues, for second reading of bills 1 through 36 inclusive, moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Hamou. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15.
Mover and seconder of third reading and enactment of bills 1 through 36 inclusive, moved by Councillor Van Hol, seconded by Councillor Lehman. We will call the vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Mover and a seconder go in. Before we do that, I will go to the clerks and just confirm to the public what it is we will be dealing with. Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, we're going into closed session to consider 4 matters. One is a labor relations employee negotiations matter. The second is a solicitor client privilege advice matter. The third is a potential litigation and solicitor client privilege matter. And the fourth is a personal matter about an identifiable individual.
Thank you. So with that, to move council into closed session, I'll look for a mover. Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Pelosa. Are we good with a show of hands? Those in favor.
Motion carries.
Thanks very much to the public. We will return out of closed session back into public session for some items and work from there. Thanks very much. With that, we will now go into